believe in the ripple effect.
What's up? Another episode of Ripple Effect Podcast. Of course, I'm your host, Ricardo Vendes, also known as Ricky Brands, and a great episode for you today. Today was a fun one. It was a very fascinating conversation with my guest, David Whitehead, who's a researcher, thinker, podcaster, host of the Truth Warrior podcast. He's also a documentary filmmaker, and we talk about all his work, his shows, his research. We talk a lot about cults, secret societies, and symbolism. And these are topics that I haven't really covered in a while, so I know you guys are going to really enjoy this. But before we get into what I know will be a very enjoyable conversation, let me remind you this is a value for value show. If you get some value out of this conversation or any of the conversations I bring to you on the Ripple Effect podcast, please consider giving some value back. And it doesn't have to be financial, like I always tell you guys. I know many people are in tough financial times, so please just rate, review, tell people about the show. Post it, share it on any platform you're on, and that goes a long way with fighting against the algorithms that are censoring shows like mine. And if you can financially support the show, there's a bunch of ways you can do so. Of course, you can support us monthly on Patreon, and you can support us with as little as $1 a month. And let's be honest, many of us go to a convenience store or gas station or a coffee shop and spend much more than $1 on a drink or a coffee, and you probably don't get as much value out of those things as you do out of the show. So please consider, for as little as $1 a month, supporting the Ripple Effect podcast on Patreon. Of course, other ways of supporting the show, if you want to do a one-time donation, is sending a one-time donation to our PayPal account, sending a one-time donation to our Venmo account. We also have a crypto wallet if you want to send Ethereum or Bitcoin. We have music if you want to download some Theory 6 music, which is my solo music project, and it's all the music you hear in the beginning and end of the Ripple Effect podcast. Download that. That's another way of supporting the show. We have merch if you want to get hoodies, t-shirts, mugs, tank tops. Now that the weather is getting a little nicer, you might want a tank top. We also have kids clothes and much more. So please check out the Ripple Effect podcast merch.com if you want to go directly to the merchandise store, but you can also find a link on our website and in the show description. So please do that. Rep the Ripple Effect podcast with some merch and also help support the show. Another way of supporting the show is listening and watching to the Ripple Effect podcast on Rockfin. And Rockfin also gives you the ability to tip the content creator for an episode you're enjoying. So if you're listening to a specific episode that you're really enjoying, you can send a couple bucks to the content creator to let them know that you're really enjoying that specific episode. And Rockfin is also just a great alternative to YouTube. If you're looking for truth seekers, if you're looking for alternative media, go to Rockfin. Tons of past guests and friends of mine are on there, like Ryan from The Last American Vagabond, James Corbett, of course, all the people you see on the Union Unwanted, like Pasta and Steve from AM Wake Up, Monica Perez, Grimerica, and my co-hosts of the Union Unwanted, Charlie Robinson and Sam Tripoli. And even though there is premium content on Rockfin, all the Ripple Effect podcast video episodes are on Rockfin for free. You can also find my other show, The Union of Unwanted, on Rockfin. We have a channel. The newest episode is always premium, and it's live streamed as premium every other Monday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. But afterwards, all the episodes eventually end up being free. So you can find all the Union of Unwanted archives there for free, minus the newest episode. And David Whitehead was recently on there, so if you want to check out another great conversation with David Whitehead, check out episode 64 of The Union of Unwanted. Now to my sponsors, one of them being one of the most important ones I have, Content Safe. That's how I get all my videos to all these platforms quickly and easily. Basically, I upload to one channel, and then Matt from Content Safe and his team syncs all my channels together. So soon after, you will find my videos on Odyssey, BitChute, Rockfin, Band.video, Rumble, all thanks to Matt from Content Safe. Please, if you're a content creator, if you're a streamer, a YouTuber, hit up Matt from Content Safe. He will save you tons of time in uploading, and let him know you're listening to Ripple Effect Podcast, and he will definitely hook you up. Another great sponsor is the University of Reason. If you're at a crossroads in life, or if you feel like you're a hamster on a wheel running in place, please check out the University of Reason and the very popular autonomy courses created by Richard Grove. And the nice thing about Richard Grove being a sponsor of the show, just like all the sponsors of the Ripple Effect Podcast, they were all past guests first before becoming a sponsor, and they're all people that I consider friends who have great services that I am proud to have as sponsors. So if you're interested in the University of Reason, please use the link in the show description or on my website so you can help yourself and the Ripple Effect Podcast at the same time. My last sponsor is Element Electrolytes, created by Rob Wolf, another past guest of the Ripple Effect Podcast. Rob was on episode 381, and you can go on my website or on any of the video platforms I'm on, Rumble, Rockfin, BitChute, Band.video, or you can search the audio on Podcast Addict. Just look up the Ripple Effect Podcast and the name Rob Wolf, or just Ripple Effect Podcast, episode 381, and learn more about Rob and why he created Element Electrolytes. And he'll also be returning to the Ripple Effect Podcast in the next couple weeks, so we're going to expand even more on the importance of Element Electrolytes. But quickly, I'll let you know that if you have headaches, muscle fatigue, low energy, it could be due to dehydration. And there's a lot of symptoms that are caused by dehydration, and staying hydrated is very difficult if you're looking for a healthy hydration option. But Element Electrolytes makes it easy for you to stay hydrated the healthy way. It has no artificial sweeteners or flavors. It's loaded with magnesium, potassium, and sodium. There's a lot of electrolyte drinks out there, but many of them don't give you enough of the electrolytes you need to optimize your body and mind. If you're an athlete or a gym rat, Element Electrolytes will definitely help you out with optimizing your body, your mind, and your performance. So use the link in the show description or use a link on my website, and you'll get a free gift with every purchase. Stay hydrated and support the Ripple Effect Podcast. So thanks, everybody. Also remember our Telegram group chat. The link's on my website and in the show description. It's a great way of connecting with myself and other listeners of the Ripple Effect Podcast. I also always post the episodes once they're uploaded to the Telegram group chat first. So a little bit before it's available on iTunes and Spotify and all the other video platforms, you will get a link to it first on the Telegram group chat. So another great reason to connect with us on the Telegram group chat. That's it, guys. Enjoy this amazing conversation with David Whitehead, and I will talk to you guys in the next one. Peace. What's up, David?
How's it going, man?
How are you?
I am good. Keeping busy, trying to survive, all those good things. How about you?
Yeah, similar.
Yeah.
With I got two little ones, and with kids and a family, and then a passion project, podcast, and all my other hobbies. I'm much like yourself, running around constantly doing something, and which is good because the alternative could be much worse. And during COVID, we all got locked down, and it sounded like a vacation to many until people realized without a purpose, there's no reason to live. So it's
exactly.
Yeah,
man. How old are your kids? You don't mind?
Yeah, no, I'm an open book. Yeah, my son just turned 8 and my daughter is 6. So
lovely.
Awesome.
Yeah, mine, I got they're both birthdays on deck. They're soon to be 11 and 7. I got 2 girls, so I'm totally outnumbered, outgunned, but I'm loving it. Love being a dad.
Yeah. Well, you definitely, anybody who says that boys and girls, it's all the whole gender thing is all a social construct, has never had a girl. I'm like, they're completely different. If you have a girl, I'm like, this is a different animal. Like, I'm not even sure this is even a little bit similar to having a boy. Like, having one of each, they're just so drastically different in the way you handle them and the way they respond to certain things and whatnot, their interests, right?
Right.
So it's which is good. I mean, that's the thing. It's like, I don't know why society Well, I think I do know why, and we'll probably get into it. But
Mhm.
they try to demonize the differences, and it's like, no, let's celebrate the differences, because just like a partnership in a business, you want to be you want a partner to have strengths where your weaknesses are, and your strengths are going to be where their weaknesses are. And it's same thing with, a mother-father relationship. It's similar thing where, like, in many cases, women are good at one thing where guys are usually a little less good at, and vice versa. And together, you make the ultimate team, hopefully. So it's
Exactly.
yeah,
But I
definitely.
think that word weakness, I think that's language of the patriarchy there, Ricky. I don't know if we're allowed to say weakness anymore. We might get censored for
Right.
that.
Very good kick on YouTube. So there's luckily all
I'm
the
just kidding.
platforms I'm on now. Yeah. Well, it's true. The thing is, no topic, nothing should be off the table to discuss.
Exactly.
That's kind of how I've always been with this show. Like, I don't care how controversial somebody is. I remember, like, years ago, first time I had Roger Stone on. This was like kind of before he was a household name. He came on to talk about a his JFK book,
Mhm.
about the link with Lyndon Johnson. And people are like, "Oh, this is a controversial guy," and I'm like, "Okay, so let me talk to him. Let me humanize him. Let me see what makes him tick. What uh, extract some wisdom, some knowledge, something about them, because I think everybody has a interesting story, and there's a lot of things below the surface. I had Jack Abramoff on years ago too, who the lobbyist at the Casino Jack movie was about.
Hmm.
And same thing. I'm like, do I agree with this guy on most things? No. But I'm like, he's lived a very interesting life, to say the least. And I'm like, I'm sure I can learn something from it, and at least shine some light just on his perspectives and who he is, and who what he believes. And you don't have to agree with them, but so I treat everything kind of like I treat my marriage. It's like, we don't have to agree on everything, but I think discussing it helps us get a little closer to the middle, and at least understanding each other's perspectives, because that's the big thing. It's like, you don't have to agree with somebody, but I think there is some value in at least trying to understand why they believe those things. And in that process of kind of discovering why they believe those things, you might find out, like, okay, maybe there is more logic in their thinking than I thought.
Well, right. And I mean, first of all, who are we all to judge each other, right? Like we all think we know things, but what do we really know at the end? We know certain things, but it's important to have other opinions, even extreme opinions sometimes to challenge, make actually maybe make your current perspective more strengthened by having those outside opinions. And then in the end, I also think, how boring would this planet be if everybody just thought I did exactly the same? Like we have this culture now where they're talking about diversity, but they don't really want true diversity, which would be diversity of thinking, diversity of opinion and perspective, so that we can actually grow and challenge our belief systems. Think of all the greatest discoveries ever made. It was always few different individuals here and there going against the tide of the status quo that thought they knew everything. And lo and behold, they turned out to be vindicated probably after they got burnt at the stake or incarcerated. So, this is why I always say we have to, it's the old statement by Socrates, the more you know you don't know. And that's your operation manual.
It's funny. I was thinking about that recently. I was watching Alex Jones on Tim Dillon, right? And they're obviously, why wouldn't you watch that? Because they're both hilarious.
Yeah.
Like, I was watching about how Tim Dillon was like defending Alex Jones and telling him, like, dude, everybody calls you this lunatic, this crazy person, but you were right about this and you were right about that. And I'm like, Alex Jones is kind of a perfect example of that, of like, you go against the grain and everybody calls you a crazy person. And then once those crazy people voices, people shouting that, once that those voices get quieter and people start kind of analyzing what you're actually saying, you're like, actually, he's not as crazy as we thought he was. And
Yeah.
in many cases, most of us are like that. I always try to take people on a journey of like discovering new ways of looking at things, or conspiracy theories, for lack of a better term. I try to take them on this journey with baby steps. It's like, I don't want to overwhelm them. I don't want to.
Right.
Then so it's like you try to ease them into it. And I think the thing with like Alex Jones, a lot of times he's so energetic and passionate and worked up that he just throws a bunch of things at you all at once. And to the average person, they're like, oh my God, this guy's insane. Like, all these things he said just can't be true. So it's true. Like even in our modern day, I think many of us, the research you're doing on your show, the conversations I have on this show, and the researchers I have on, like yourself, like in many cases, a lot of the things that we dive into are things that the average person is going to think is crazy, and it in result would call us crazy. And in
Right.
time, after reflecting, we end up being right, or at least they realize we're not as crazy as we seem. And throughout history, like you were saying too, which is so important, so many people that were called crazy end up being right, or end up being now people that we celebrate. And a lot of times also not people who were experts in those fields. There are people from like looking at those fields from a different perspective, from a different expertise, because a lot of times those fields become cults. And that's kind of what we're probably going to talk a little bit about today. But for people listening, before we get too carried away,
Yeah, no problem.
for people listening who maybe aren't familiar with your background, some of the work you do, some of the topics and subjects you spend a lot of time researching and exploring, let people know who David Whitehead is.
Sure. Well, first of all, thanks for inviting me on, Ricky, and it was fun to join that other chat the other day. And we need more conversations like this. And so if people want to know about me, I was born and raised in Canada. My original passion was martial arts and fitness and, health fields. So I've been doing that my whole life, and that became my career. And then I started a sort of side career of researching things that I was curious about, because I was just a guy that had a lot of questions about the crazy world we live in and the purpose of life. I always had an interest in philosophy and history and some of the more fringe subjects. I don't know what it is. I just had this curiosity in me. And I always had this mantra of, never trust known liars and criminals, always question everything, always think for yourself. And this was very strong coming through from all my senseis growing up to the philosophers I read. I grew up with people like Bruce Lee, and some of those got not with him, but reading him, reading about what he was talking about. And that affected me. So I compiled all of that, all those different fields of philosophy, history, conspiracy, politics, all kinds of stuff. I've mixed it together into my podcast, which is called Truth Warrior. I used to do this on, online radios back in like 2008. That's when I kind of started. And then eventually I got picked up by History Channel, did a bunch of work in Hollywood with them on shows like Unexplained, Ancient Aliens, Monster Mysteries, just some of the fun stuff, right? But the whole time I was really wanting to do very serious research on these subjects, because all the subjects that are covered on shows like that, it's kind of like a circus, right? Like, and it's become so polluted that most people think it's all a circus and won't take the time to actually look at the legit research from very, very eminent people. And so I wanted to sort of bring all that out on my show. I also do a project with my good friend, colleague. He's kind of my sensei in these fields, I'd say, is Michael Tessarian from Ireland, who's a infamous occult researcher, just an author, incredible intellect. And he and I do a project called Unslaved, and it's a custom built premium podcast / mystery school that we do online. It's only a few bucks a month, and there's thousands of hours of archive of unique research you're never going to hear anywhere else. And then I do my own independent editing films and whatnot, where I'm working on this project called Cult of the Medics. And it's a 12-part docu-series that I'm doing. It's more not official documentary, more of like, I think of myself almost like a DJ, where I remix some of my own interviews I've done with people and experts and whistleblowers, some of the old documentary footage, some of the current events, and just kind of put it all together. And what I feel like my contribution is to have that sort of martial art philosophy behind this kind of research. And when you put those two together, I just feel like it helps strengthen people rather than just debilitate them with all this negative, dark information. Like, it counterbalances it really well, so you can actually survive researching these things without losing your mind. And at the same time, I wanted to just show people a totally different perspective on even some of the things that they know about, they've read about, even some of the different subjects that are talked about on a lot of podcasts, trying to remix it and add something new, because we have to compare notes, and the ultimate goal is to try to get to the truth. So I cover a lot of different stuff, but really I'm passionate about it. I didn't intend for this to become a career path. In fact, I'm very close to reopening my dojo again soon after it got shut down. So I'm going to be doing a bit of both. But now it became more relevant. It became more important to talk about. It wasn't just a fun subject to study. It became like, oh, this is happening. This is really happening. So let's talk about it. So I do a bit of everything. And yeah, I'm a father, entrepreneur, and I'm here for the truth, man.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I'm very similar where I'm a very curious person, so that's the kind of the fun part of being kind of starting your own podcast is like I can kind of go down any rabbit hole that I find interesting at the moment, and then once you're done with that rabbit hole, you move on to the next one. And but the fitness thing is interesting because I have kind of a similar background, and I've always been fitness and working out and playing sports and did a little bit of martial arts, but I've always been a big MMA guy. I've had Justin Wren on and Pat Miletich, who's also a Freemason, and but which we'll talk about a little bit about the Freemasons. But Pat Miletich, Eddie Bravo was on when he thought the world was still round. So this was pre flat Earth Eddie Bravo.
Oh my God.
So but he it seemed like a lot of people in the martial arts and like that realm, there were a lot of open-minded people who were questioning things. I don't know if it's maybe the critical thinking and the problem-solving skills required to be good at those things, because you do have to, problem solve. Basically, you're trying to figure out what's their weakness, where are my weaknesses, where, what can I expose? How do I, figure out how to get out of this if I'm stuck in this situation? All those type of things. Or maybe some of it could also be just like the social atmosphere, right? Like everybody's hanging out, you're bullshitting, you're talking, you're sharing ideas, that type of stuff. But yeah, I was the same way. But that's why when like a lot of the vaccine stuff, like now it's a huge topic in the alternative media community, like vaccines, health issues. But for a long time, it wasn't. It was, I remember having Del Bigtree on for the first time. Like, not a lot of people were kind of hitting on the vaccine topic. I was always intrigued with like the lies around cholesterol and all this stuff. I'm a keto carnivore type guy. I'm a big, I've had Rob Wolf on the show. I've had Dominic D'Agostino. I'm a big believer that we're not just being lied to about everything except food. Like food and diet and health is also, basically being used as a tool and a weapon, just like everything else is. And
absolutely,
so did those paths also meet at some point in your curiosity and all that stuff, where you're being big into health and I'm sure nutrition and trying to figure out ways to optimize your body and mind? You figured out like, okay, a lot of the stuff that they're telling us on TV are lies. It's not just the war propaganda and that, but I'm like, there's propaganda in regards to health and nutrition.
Absolutely. Actually, the health question for me was one of the primary ones because I had a lot of experience with my mother growing up where she was in and out of the hospital my whole life. Like she just got on that hamster wheel and she had complications after childbirth that started with the removal of the gallbladder, which then started other chain reactions, which then, oh, we need to take that out of you. And then, oh, we need these drugs to counter the effects of those drugs. And she went on that hamster wheel for 38 years of her life until she passed away to heart failure. She'd been addicted to morphine and things like that because they kept, every time she felt pain, they're like, oh, just take some painkillers. Let's not address the pain and get to the root cause and help you here. Let's just keep you as a lifelong client. So that, for me, when I was a kid growing up, watching her I grew up in emergency rooms in hospitals just waiting for her. Or as a young kid, my father was working shift work. I'd have to basically cut school and go bring her to the hospital, So I was wondering why the more I take her in to these medics, why is she getting worse, not better? Right. So that's where it started. And so I started reading a lot of books, a lot of them from doctors, nutritionists, other martial artists who were thinking like this as well about natural health. My old karate sensei would sit there and look at me and be like, because people would be there, oh, I'm on medication, or I have to go see the doctor for this. He's like, well, screw those doctors. What's your problem? Tell me, I'll help you. And like, well, you're not an expert. He's like, tell me, I'll help you. And then they would give him some symptoms and he'd be like, oh, you just need to do this, take these herbs, maybe get a chiropractic adjustment on that back of yours. It's out of alignment. That's why this, and he just and then they would come back and be like, dude, like, I feel great and I'm not on my meds. I even had I did some work with some Canadian veterans who suffered PTSD, and we used jujitsu as a sort of remedy for these people who, when you first start, they get the anxiety up so quick. You would just touch them to say, hey, so if like someone grabs your collar, and they're all like panicky, right? We went from that to like full pressure side control where they're breathing properly and learning how to build the frames and defense. And it was just like, and then these guys would come back and tell me, I'm off the meds. I flushed them down the toilet. I told my doctor to go F off. And I just told them I'm just doing jujitsu now because it totally changed my life. I can sleep again. I don't have panic attacks, you know? So these are the experiences that led me to think there's something really wrong, not just with a few elements of our medical system and our nutrition system, the whole thing, but like the foundation itself needs to be forensically looked at. And I think that the foundation of health is a lifestyle, not just something you react to all the time, right? So diet is huge. What you put in your body, you know, breaking news, what you put in your body is going to determine a lot of your health outcomes. And also there's a huge lack of respect for the mental aspect of health. Well, how much our thoughts are, the anxiety that builds up in your mind is actually building up as disease in your body physically, and in many cases. And I think that that's huge. So I'm a real mind over matter kind of person. I've just seen the effects in my own life and other people. And so it made me question everything. And then all the diet fads started, and I just went, you know, everybody's got their version of what's the best diet and all this, but I just go, well, what's the best diet for you? Right? What, like, there's many diet paths and nutrition paths that will probably work out for optimal health. But you have to be the determining factor, you know? So I started doing experiments for myself. I went vegetarian for a couple of years. I'm O negative. That was a disaster. I just had disastrous health outcomes, and I actually did it correctly. You know, I had a bunch of friends of mine go raw vegan. It worked for them for a while because it works as a nice cleanse, but then they started seeing problems later down the road. But then other people know. So I mean, maybe it works great for some people. Other people I know went carnivore and they're just having amazing results. Other people, it wasn't good, you know? So I just went, in the end, you know, we have so many tools at our disposal now, Ricky. We can come watch podcasts like this and we can go research this information ourselves. We don't have to go to the cult of the experts all the time anymore. We can actually learn a lot and become self-experts about our own lives because who knows you better than you? So I try to tell people, get out of the cult of the experts, you know, listen to them for their valuable knowledge in their field, but don't follow it like a cult. Try to just take information and keep building your mind and your body towards something that actually benefits you, and only you know what's best. So it's huge. And then there's what I think is the food sort of conspiracy element, where to me, there's an overt agenda through the medical system and the food system to keep us sick and on a short lifespan. And we can get into why I think that is, but I think it's pretty obvious at this point, when all these chemicals and carcinogens are in everything from your sunscreen, all that hand sanitizer everybody's marinating their kids with is just loaded with carcinogens and toxins that they don't need. Everything you pull off the shelf, you start looking at the ingredients, and it's an absolute horror show with the stuff that's in your food and in your skin creams and in your toothpaste and all that shit. And so you just start to go, well, nature knows best, and we just keep coming along and thinking we know better and messing it up. But in the end, nature always wins. So that's kind of my philosophy, is take from everybody, learn from everybody, hear everybody out. But in the end, you're going to have to make your own decisions. And then when you do that, everybody's going to be mad at you for it. So learn how to have a backbone to stand up for yourself, you know?
Yeah, I keep saying it. Like, we keep trying to reinvent the wheel, but the wheel was already invented and it worked pretty well.
Exactly.
And in many cases, you look at, like, you know, I'm a big fan of, like yourself, like anybody who's an athlete, you should constantly be open-minded to finding out, how do I optimize my body, my mind, physically, if it's eating, if it's training, whatever it may be. So I'm a big fan of, like, people like Wim Hof, the knees over toes guy. Like,
Oh,
people,
he's great. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I've trained like that now since I've kind of discovered his work. And you know, a lot of the stuff makes perfect sense. It's like, oh, so we had it figured out, then we thought we could do it better, or in many times it's like corporate interest ends up pushing people in another direction, and then we find out it leads to some issues. The knees over toes guy is a perfect example. Nike, first ones to start putting big cushioning on your shoe. If you have kids, I have kids, we know when kids are learning to walk, they're on the ball of their feet. That's kind of the way we are designed to walk. We're quicker, when we're on our toes, when we're on the ball of our feet. Also, before there were shoes with big cushioning, if we ran heel first, it would hurt. If we're on, some hard surface, it would hurt. So Nike is like, hey, we have this great idea. We'll put all this cushioning on the heel. So if you land on your heel or whatever, it protects you. Well, what it also does is messes up your mechanics, because now it's the first time in history that you can basically, without hurting yourself or without any pain, you could run and walk heel first and be completely comfortable.
Right.
That's why we look at old basketball players who are playing in completely flat Converse. And we're like, how did they do that? Those shoes must be so uncomfortable. It's like, no, because they were flat. They were running and jumping and walking with the right mechanics, because they couldn't run and jump on their heels because it would hurt. So what happened was that we try to take a idea, improve it, and we made it worse. And a lot of it was, it was a business move. It was like, okay, we're Nike, we're going to try to make a better shoe, and they didn't care the fact that they messed up our mechanics. And anybody who's ever had an injury knows, like, if you hurt your hip, your knee, and all of a sudden your mechanics are off, or you start putting more weight on one side of your body than the other, all these other pains start popping up. So it's like, if your mechanics aren't right, then basically it can mess up everything. And Wim Hof, the same thing. Like, we live these very just what's the word I'm looking for?
Sedentary, maybe,
Exactly.
just sitting on our asses all day. Yeah.
Very shallow breathing, and typically we never lived like that. We would take in a lot of oxygen, and if anybody's ever done Wim Hof's method, it is amazing, with no supplements, no anything, what it does to your body. I would do it when I'm sore, like if my legs are sore and I got to play basketball or play soccer, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm so sore, I'm going to cramp up. I would do it, and you'd feel this tingly feeling, and all of a sudden the soreness would be gone. And you're like, what did I just tap into? Like, I didn't do anything, in regards to putting in any supplements or anything like that. And it's like, it's gone, and your cardio would be, and you're like, so my point is, like, a lot of people in the health and nutrition world, and people who are athletes and workout or martial arts, they understand that doctors are wrong all the time. There's a lot of professional athletes that were told they're never going to walk again, they're never going to play sports again, that they would never recover from this injury, they'd never be rolling and doing jujitsu again, and they did it. And it plants that seed of skepticism of these experts. And it also, what it does, it expands your mind to the capability of the human spirit, the mind, the body, that it's this beautiful machine that can do some beautiful things as long as you give it the things it needs.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I agree with everything there. And yeah, I'm still learning the Wim Hof. I used to just do the old Hickson Gracie belly breathing stuff, and that destroyed any anxiety that I would ever feel before a big something coming up, right? A big show or whatever, a big tournament. And I just went, wow, breathing. It's the simplest thing ever. And I think there was like an old Chinese kung fu saying something about he who masters the breath masters the universe or something. And I thought, hey, that's pretty cool. But you're not going to have your doctor tell you that, because they're not trained to respond to these issues with that information. They're trained to open up the manual that was given to them by the pharmaceutical industry, which is the most powerful lobby on the face of this planet. And they are in the business of keeping you coming back. They're not in the business of making sure that you know that you can actually heal yourself at home with shit growing in your backyard, or just a few little tweaks of your diet or your breathing or your mental attitude. If people knew how simple health can be, I think people would actually not believe how simple it is. That's how programmed we are. And I look at what we just went through with this whole pandemic. How is medical science going to recover from this? I hope they do. I hope they fix the problems. I hope we can figure this out. But it's devastating what's happened. The amount of lies that people were told, the amount of damage that was caused by those lies, that misinformation, whether people want to look at it as just incompetence or they got it wrong, or whether you want to look at it from my angle, which is that at the top levels, at least, this was totally deliberate. It doesn't really matter. We're in the same discussion that we're all learning right now that when it comes to our finance, we need to become more independent. Look at the economy. You want to go down with the ship or what? When it comes to our mental health, stop going to take all these psychiatric drugs. There's so many natural remedies and basic things that you can do to rid yourself. I'm not talking about managing it. Rid yourself of anxiety and depression. Okay. You can get rid of it. Physical health. You have scores of experts online that will, for like $29.95 or even for free, will tell you life-saving information today that you can verify. They got all the science, they got all the methods, and people are having great benefits. We live in a great time for information, yet everybody's getting kind of dumbed down at the same time. It's really shocking, but that doesn't mean you have to go down that route. There's brilliant solutions available to us. As you said, Ricky, I agree with you. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. There's already been great minds and great people here well before us to solve our problems politically, economically, spiritually, physically, in terms of the corruption and all of that. Great minds have graced this planet. And what I try to do is look for them, bring them back out, and remind people that they exist and that these solutions exist, because they do, and stop believing the lies that they don't.
Yeah, I mean, even with and there's always been people out there who are going against the narrative. Unfortunately, censorship has been around for a long time. It's not a new thing.
Right.
People like Max Gerson and some of his he helped a lot of people with his therapies with juicing and type of things like that. Dr. Brzezinski, who was on my podcast in like 2013 or 14, and he was curing people of cancer with anti-myoplastones, and he gets raided by the government and tries to shut him down. The filmmakers who did what was the name of the documentary? The Truth About Cancer, who also did the Truth About, all their films are about the truth about something, but the Truth About Cancer series, that family that did that documentary series, and it's a great documentary series. They helped Roger Stone's wife cure herself of cancer completely without pharmaceutical drugs. So it's like there is doctors out there. There are doctors out there who have different perspectives, who have different, but it's like you said, it's all a cult, and it becomes a cult. And just like, any cult, everybody buys in and you get brainwashed to what your leaders say. And there's this hierarchy, and it's really hard to snap somebody out of that cult-like thinking. And really throughout history, it seems like there always seems to be cults and also some like maybe suppressed knowledge and wisdom. And I'd love to get into that because especially with, I brought up Pat Middleton. She's a Freemason. Sometimes people will be like, oh, he's a Freemason. Like they have this interpretation of like Freemasons are either good or bad. And like I tell people, I'm like, my personal opinion, dealing with people that I know that are part of the Freemasons, it seems like there's hierarchies, and there you might meet a lot of really good guys who just don't know what the hell the origin is of the whole organization, or maybe the purpose or whatever. And I don't know. I mean, is that do you subscribe to that idea? Am I wrong in saying that? And also, like, what made you so intrigued with a lot of these occults and secret societies, for lack of a better term, and these type of groups?
Yeah, great question. Great topic. Well, just the Freemason thing as well. First of all, I've interviewed Pat, and he was a fantastic martial artist, and he's done a lot of great work. I know I know a few different Freemasons in my life, low level, nothing beyond any kind of third degree or anything, which is most Masons. And even the guys saying, "Oh, I'm 33, whatever, in a third degree," yeah, bullshit. If you are, trust me, there's layers to this cake. Okay. And there's a difference between your local Masonic lodge, which is mostly just some guys getting together, playing around with ancient knowledge and mysteries and having a couple drinks and getting out of the house for the weekend, and maybe maybe they help each other get into like, oh, I'll get you that contract with the plumbing contract, or I'll get you this, or like, it's just sort of like a little network. Okay. Nothing on the basic level nefarious going on. And even historically, you got to remember the Freemasonic history. There's all kinds of opinions on this, but my take is that it goes all the way back to ancient Egypt. And there's a whole history of that. There's a connection to the history of the Templars that's involved as well at the top levels. And all Freemasonry was just the knowledge of how to build things. That's all it was. It was there's actual like practical Freemasons that are just the builders, and then there's the speculative Freemasons and the philosophical Freemasons and all that. But they had the knowledge that was lost to time. They like, I'm talking at the top here, okay? The top lodges in Europe, they had knowledge of all the histories of these religions, philosophies, and how to build not just buildings, but how to build culture, how to build civilization, how to build an economy, how to build your mind, to connect to nature. So the knowledge itself is not good or evil. It's amoral. It's just knowledge. It's like a hammer. I can take a hammer and build something with it, or I can crack someone in the skull with it. It's the hand that wields the knowledge. The other thing I'll say is that I do this actually in the series, and I've done many podcasts on this. It was actually Michael Tessarian who pointed this out, and he's an expert on this. I would say he's the world's foremost expert on it. He would never admit to that, but I'll say that about him. That he pointed out he went and actually looked at some untranslated communications that were between European nobles back in the 1700s, right? And there were communications from people like the Duke of Brunswick in England, who was the head, or no, he'd be in Germany, the head of all German European Freemasonry at the time. And he was an elite aristocrat. Okay. So this isn't from some Joe Schmo. And he was actually talking about how he was so concerned that Freemasonry and the structure of Freemasonry, because it's very compartmentalized, like the military, he was concerned that it was being infiltrated by what he called a dark sun cult. That's what he called it. So he was saying our ranks are being infiltrated, and we're being recruited. They're recruiting European nobles and aristocrats into this cult, essentially. And they're very nefarious. And he saw it as such a problem that he actually called for the disbandment of Freemasonry. He said, we need to disband our order and dissolve it immediately to stop the spread of this cancerous plague that's going through our institutions. Because think about this. There's people that want to earn their way in life, and they want to earn their position. They want to earn their privilege. They want to earn their money and their power. And then there's the people that don't want to earn it, and they just want to take it. They're pirates. They're criminals. Okay. And so they don't do things during the light of day. They don't do things out in the open. They do things cloak and dagger style. They are, for lack of a better term, conspiratorial in the method that they employ to take those positions of power and influence. So what better way, if you wanted to take over political power, well, you find out where are the centers of influence in political power. And you find, we got all these lodges, these European lodges that are full of a variety of people, many of which are extremely influential and very powerful, because it became very popular in that era, right? And so what we do is we capture not the political houses, but the Masonic houses. And these they're not the only nocturnal club that they captured. There's many secret societies and sort of breakaway groups that were probably very benign in the beginning. You got to remember that through history, many were trying to dodge the bullets of the church or the power from coming out and excommunicating them or executing them or arresting them for saying anything that went against their cult. So they went underground. So there was a legitimate reason that secret societies were formed once upon a time. But like all things, it gets rotten, it gets corrupt, wrong people get in, a couple bad apples, they take the thrones of power and they turn it into a different thing that it was originally intended to be. So there's my sort of speech to silence those people that are, I just look at them as they're just a bit naive. They've learned a few things about some of the dark sides of Freemasonry, and there absolutely is. It's a festering boil of corruption at this point, especially at the top. And I know even in some of the locals as well, it's turned into some kind of a mafia. But that's not to be a brush that you paint everybody. It'd be the same thing if I said, okay, let's get into the history of the Vatican and the Jesuits and all that. Not everybody was bad there either. Even this cult of the medics, where I'm talking about groups like these chivalric orders that come out of Rome, like the Knights of Malta, the Templars, etc. not everybody's evil. Not everybody was wrong and evil, but it became that way. And it's just this thing that happens with power. Power can tend to corrupt, right? So I have a much more nuanced stance on some of this than your average conspiracy buffs, I guess. And that's because I do deep research and try to get very specific with it, because I don't want to throw allegations in the wrong direction. I want to identify the top of the power pyramid, who these people are, why we're seeing so much corruption, tyranny, evil, and disease and everything in the world under their watch. And that's who I'm looking at. But by no means does that indict everybody. You just have to look at the actual specifics, you know?
Well, what you're saying makes sense because the pyramid on the dollar bill, right? Like everybody's always like, what does that have to do with American history or Western European history? So the fact that the origin story could start there makes sense. Now, how many of these groups do you think are connected? And because you have, I mean, even today in modern day times, you have Skull and Bones, you have the Bohemian Grove, you have all these secret societies that have these weird rituals, and symbolism seems to be important. Like, are some of these groups and rituals coming from the same places? And what's your opinion on that?
Yeah, that's a good one. I look at these, I like to look at them all as separate to start. If I was researching this with a blank slate, I'd go, okay, there's Bohemian Grove. What's going on with that? What facts do we have about it, right? Do we have any insider testimony or anything else? Then what's Skull and Bones? What's this? And then you'll look at it in isolation to start. And I recommend people do. And you could look at this to start as being like a bunch of different gangs of people that just organize together to achieve something. They have a goal of enlightenment, or they have a goal of achieving political power, or whatever, where they're just freaks and they like this weird S&M stuff and they do lots of weird shit like masturbating in caskets and all this weird crazy stuff. Whatever, okay? Whatever floats your boat. My question is, how does that impact our political and social situation if we got people in those various groups that are probably competing against each other in many factions, right, at the lower levels? And maybe that's why we see so much corruption, is it's not just this monolithic unified cult. It's these splinter groups, just like the triads and the La Cosa Nostra and all these guys fighting for turf territory. Look at history from Genghis Khan to expansion of empire to today. It just seems to be something in human nature that we do. So we got to look at it like that. And then I say, okay, that being said, then you start getting into the symbolism. Then you start looking at the details of these various rituals. Then you look at some of their initiation ceremonies, which are put right out on the public stage. Like, do a lot of people know that when they go to some of these Katy Perry concerts or these Super Bowl halftime shows or these Olympic game opening ceremonies, that what we're actually witnessing is an occult ritual that's documented and hasn't changed very much, going all the way back to ancient times? And so then the question is it benign or malignant? Like, what's happening? I tend to look at it from the perspective that at the top of it all, there are the alpha lodges. Okay. So you have the alpha groups, and alpha meaning head of the pack, top of the food chain. These are the 13 bloodlines. These are the top level people that trace their lineage all the way back to the pharaohs of Egypt and before. Some of them even believe in the Atlantean theory, and they go all the way back to there. And then you have the groups that have built up underneath these different edifices of power. So the alpha groups, that's the steering committee. That's your committee of 300. That's, I think, literally the people that run the planet. Okay. And so, like, at least from their stance, it's so complex, it's hard to break it down, but I'm doing my best here. So you have the top of the power pyramid. That's symbolically, that's the separated capstone. So you have the 13 layers of the pyramid below, which is showing you on this level, okay, because there's many interpretations for the symbolism of a pyramid. It's not all evil, but in their mentality, the way they employ it, is the underlay or the underlying structure of that pyramid is the layers of compartmentalization. Okay. When you get to the bottom, the people are under the pyramid. We're not even a part of the pyramid in their scheme. Okay. We're sort of propping the pyramid up on our shoulders. All right. And then the power center is a removed capstone. Now, that symbol, the removed capstone with the all-seeing eye, was literally just a symbol for God, a symbol for the divine. That's all it was. But when a psychopathic, power-thirsty gang co-opts that symbol and employs it, you got to start asking, not what does it mean to the ancient Egyptians? It's what does it mean to these mofos, right? And they see it as a symbol of power. And they also know something really interesting, Ricky, which is that they know that symbolism has a certain on and off switch in our subconscious atavistic mind. So there's something about the power of these ancient religious mystical symbols, which were all derived from nature, by the way. They know that that has a power over, there's something that it opens up in our minds, which is why you see these used as logos for everything from toothpaste to big blockbuster films to political parties to the next COVID vaccine or whatever it is. You see those ancient occult symbols being employed, not because the symbol itself is good or evil, but because it's powerful and it has an effect on your mind. And that's how they know how to build brands. I mean, Madison Avenue knows this. Look at the fashion magazines. Look how they do this. They use symbolism. They use color symbolism. It's really, really detailed because they understand human psychology. So if I was to boil down the knowledge that these people possess at the top, it's deep, deep knowledge of how you and I tick on a deep level psychologically. And if they have that knowledge and we don't, that gives them advantage on what they call the grand chessboard. The white and checkerboard floors on every single movie you ever watch and all over your big parliament buildings, they're giving you a hint. That used to stand for the white and black squares of knowledge and ignorance. And now it's a symbol to say you're on our chessboard now. And if you act of your own free will to support our agenda, it's fair game, So it's sort of a game that a lot of these guys look at it as. And the reason you're asking before about my interest in cults was because right before this pandemic, I was doing a show with Unexplained, where they wanted to study cults. They were looking at Heaven's Gate, Jim Jones, some of these different cults. And I was doing this project for them and I had all this research, but by the time I got to do the show, I think I got like 5 minutes of airtime total, to break down. And I was like, I got to really do better justice to this. So I went and did my own podcast series on Rockfin called Cults of Death and Power. And what it was just like raw 4-hour presentation style breakdowns of all this ancient cult stuff. And I was looking at it, is there any commonality between the ancient cults and the modern cults? And that was all fresh in my mind when the big green button for the pandemic and this new lockdown policy was employed. And I went, oh, interesting. I'm starting to see some parallels here. And so the interest in cults that I had was just my attempt to explain evil and to explain how good people get swept up into suicide and ritualistic murder type cults. And where they'll do all kinds of stuff, like think of Nexium and some of these things where they're literally branding women as slaves. But it's not like the women were necessarily being forced, is it? They were coerced into it or they were manipulated into it. So I had that question arise. Well, we always look at the cult leaders, Jim Jones and all these guys, Charles Manson, but very few people ask the question about why so many people follow these crazy people, right? And that was my sort of awakening moment. And so I started looking at that and then putting that together with what I was saying about the Masons and the top levels of the pyramids. You realize these people know how to create cults because they themselves are cultists of the highest order. And they understand that if you want to control and seize influence, power, land, resources, or wealth, you have to control the minds of the public that inhabit those spaces. And that's the game. There's different competing factions of the pyramid, but I do believe that there are alpha lodges and alpha cults that literally run the show and have the most amount of power and influence. And that's who I sort of set my sights on.
Yeah, that's so interesting. And so that kind of shines a light on one part of cults and secret societies that I find interesting. But the other aspect of these cults and why Hitler, for example, was so intrigued with occultism and secret knowledge and going all over the planet looking for UFOs to reverse engineer and whatnot.
Right.
Another aspect of all these secret societies is this idea that they could be hiding sacred knowledge or wisdom, not just to control people, but even like technology, the secrets on how they created these pyramids and so many of these structures that they're finding all over the planet. That's obviously many people listening to the show know I'm a big fan of Randall Carlson and Graham Hancock. And one thing that Graham says that I absolutely love is this idea that a lot of times people look at, and because he's not a religious person, I don't believe, but they look at like biblical words and scriptures and all this stuff, and they kind of just say, oh, they don't know what they were talking about. And he looks at it as like, maybe they're telling you something, maybe there's something more there. You can't just dismiss it as like it's ignorance to how the universe works, and that's why it sounds supernatural or whatever. Maybe there is something supernatural that we don't understand. And it always reminds me of this Tesla quote about how if you want to understand the universe, you have to understand energy, frequency, and vibration. And I remember years ago when I had Dr. Tom Cowan on, one thing I loved about Tom Cowan is that he kind of opened my mind to water, right? And like this idea that even water could potentially be intelligent. We look at these things as just like matter that, is unintelligent, but there could be something there that we don't quite understand. I mean, humans are made up of mostly water, and you start seeing all these experiments about, people playing different types of music, and the water as it crystals, if you freeze it, it would change the way it would crystallize and all this stuff, and all these also experiments with like vibration in water and frequencies in water, and how you could see water come out of a faucet and changing vibration and frequency, the water will spin and do different maneuvers and all this crazy stuff. So it's like there's obviously something we don't quite understand. And then I've also had Rupert Sheldrake on the show, and all his experiment about like this idea that mice could learn a maze, here in America, and then mice in Canada near you are learning that same maze that they've never been exposed to, or have never been exposed to these other mice. They're learning it quicker, and you could quantify, you could see it, and maybe you can't explain it, but without a doubt, it's happening. And all these things are puzzle pieces to the the overall puzzle. Like I always say, like life is just like the biggest puzzle ever, and you just hope that at the end of your journey you've gathered enough pieces that the image becomes a little clearer. You could have a hunch on what it all could mean, but your life goal is to just kind of gather as many pieces as possible, and then figuring out where they fit and how they can come together to kind of help you see the image. But all these things are intriguing, and I always I don't know how they're all connected, but I feel like they're all connected, right? We talked when you were on the Union Unwanted with us, this whole Joe Rogan story with this guy Malcolm Bendall, who is creating this like technology that he came from like what he thinks is like old technology that maybe previous civilizations had. And,
right, yeah.
And kind of rediscovering these things, and you see people talking about anti-gravity and vibration and all these ways of looking at the universe that we might have it all wrong. And I think we talked about on Union of the Unwanted, but I know I've said it before about how like we look at technology and we think it's like advanced drastically, but I feel like computer technology has completely taken our focus away from everything else. Like all our resources and investments and greatest minds go to advancing computer chips and computers and this type of technology. But when you look at like vibration and all these other things, like I said, energy, vibration, frequency, like these are kind of seem to be like technology or fields that we haven't really advanced in, because nobody's really spending time thinking about it except like Tesla and others. Do you think that these things are connected, and could some of these things be rediscovered, or have them, or maybe they don't need to be rediscovered because there's people out there in these secret societies or whatever, maybe Freemasons, Knights Templar, or whoever it may be, that maybe are aware of this information and is just suppressed from the the average person from society.
Yeah, I do think it's all connected. I love that you had Sheldrake on. He's a gem. I interviewed him a while back too, and that's just groundbreaking knowledge that actually goes back to what a lot of the ancient cultures already believed. So it's like you said, we don't have to reinvent the wheel. It's actually and that idea of technology. I'm very interested in that theory of that gentleman you guys brought up. I still have to do the digs on that because that's fascinating. Because I believe that a lot of what we call myth is actually just fanciful stories of reality that they told in mythological cultural narratives. So they broke down events that happened or the way they saw things through the lens of their cultural religious language. And it's the old saying, you know, all technology is always viewed first as magic until, you know, like until you know how it works, it's magical and spiritual and we don't have an, but when you really understand how it works, you go, oh, that's how it works. And that's why I love modern thinkers like Sheldrake and many others who are bringing the scientific language to explain sort of more what you would usually call mystical or esoteric type of knowledge. Because we need that, because that's how the original sciences started. They started with an aspect of both the left and the right brain, right? Whereas today it got funneled into the left brain of just let's get into the parts and overanalyze everything, and it's all materialistic. There's something more behind it, and I think that part of that is a phase of our development as beings to learn this again. The other aspect is the suppression, the outright suppression of many people who have tried to communicate this. And that's why I do believe there are conspiracies running in the world, and that these occult secret societies, these dark ones at least, they are definitely manipulating these things because they don't want the average person to realize that we don't need them. We don't need their stuff. We don't need the cult of the medics. We don't need the military industrial complex. We don't need any of that stuff. We can, most of the things that we need can be generated from within ourselves and an understanding of nature. And if we all had that understanding, we would literally be freed from their matrix of control. Because the reason their control works is because they've convinced us that we need them in order to survive. We need them to have power over us in order to survive. And that's a load of shit. So the ancients, I believe, had far more technology than mainstream historians are willing to admit. And just to quickly rebut anybody's problem with that, think about what happened during the pandemic. I love this as the best example of all time right now. How many doctors were suppressed and fired and censored, even taken out, just for actually being proven right? Like now they're being proven right. All the things we got banned from Facebook for saying are now being factually verified. And there's no apology and there's no retractions, and we're just marching on like nothing happened. Does anybody actually think that was the first time something like that happened, or that it only happened in the medical field? It's been happening in the medical field since the advent of the modern medical field, since the Rockefeller medicine takeover, right? Because they want to pigeonhole everybody into a one-seasoned approach for everything related to health. That is because that's their business model. Imagine you could force the entire world to take your product and you just sit back and make trillions and gain more political power and influence. So that's one field. Now get into history and archaeology. I've got books on my shelf from people who are some of the most eminent historians and archaeologists, people that were on the dig sites. You know, bring Ralph Ellis on to tell you his stories. That guy will blow your mind with the amount of chicanery going on in archaeology and history. The man's had his name smeared on Wikipedia like so many, yet he's an absolute genius that everybody should listen to. And, you know, so, and then think of all the discoveries. Think of people like Ed Leeds-Scallan, the guy that built the Coral Castle, based on Tesla's knowledge, saying the same thing: energy, frequency, vibration. Here's a little old man, weighs 130 pounds, is able to build these megalithic sites overnight. How did he do it? And then when you get into secret societies, yeah, the real secret society cults that are of interest to me dovetail into the military industrial complex and the intelligence community, because there's the cult of intelligence that people need to realize. And I talk about this in my series, both in chapter 6 and in chapter 8. We get into the cult of intelligence, where I show that if I was talking before about this Knights of Malta group, which originally was the Knights Hospitallers, who were the first builders of hospitals during the Crusades, and then became the profiteers of death and disease, and I believe are the progenitors of our medical system. They also had members in the Nazi Party. They were top members in the Adolf Hitler's SS that were members of the Knights of Malta, fully endorsed by the Vatican, by the way. And there were members, all the top founders of the CIA, the FBI, the NSA in America are all card-carrying Knights of Malta. Coincidence? So these are the guardians of the secret family occultists, right? That's who they really work for. They don't work for your nation, because the people running your nation, just to let people know, are not nationalists or nationists, however you want to look at it. They don't like, they're not in, the guys running America don't believe in America. They're trying to destroy America and meld America into the new world system. In Canada, does anybody get the feeling like Trudeau and all these jokers are actually like they care about Canada and you? No, they're working for globalists who don't look at nations and individuals the way you and I do. They want to see the elimination of all of that. So who protects them? Well, that's your intelligence cults. And they have intelligence, not just about spy satellites and all that. They have access to classified information about technology, about all kinds of stuff. And I actually think they're the real guardians of what you could call the breakaway civilization. So at the top, the real alphas that I was talking about, these are people, quote unquote, who view themselves as separate or above and superior to the rest of the human family. That's why they've broken away. And they were able to break away because of the immense amount of wealth, not just of physical finance, but also of knowledge of how nature works, how psychology works, and everything else. So they have an advantage of superior knowledge that they basically gleaned from sort of being the raiders of the lost ark and pillaging the ancient knowledge from the different traditions that produced it, and then continuing their scientific advancement to achieve the ability to go off planet, the ability to create these surveillance systems and bring in this technology. And so I look at it as, they have definitely got advanced technology. It would blow everybody's mind. Just think of statements from people like Ben Rich, who was formerly head of Lockheed Skunk Works, who came out and admitted it, as did many. And then, what the hell's flying around our skies with impunity that can outmaneuver like the top fighter jets that we know and have been doing so for at least 60 years, documented, and there's sightings of these kinds of things going back. Even I was just reading stuff. These are sightings that are documented in the 1700s before the Wright brothers. So what the hell is that? So have they cracked things like time travel? Are they off planet? Do they have a secret space program? Do they have underground facilities? Who are we talking about here? So there's a really big picture that we can get into on all that. But I just try to tell people, knowledge is power. They have the keys of knowledge. We don't. And so if we want to even get close to being able to take our freedom back, we're going to have to up our game when it comes to this knowledge. And thank God for the amazing people that have come before us, like your Tesla, Wilhelm Reich, Walter Russell, etc., Raymond Reif. And then now these great people like Sheldrake and others that have come out to continue to help bring the common man into the fold of the knowledge that is known on this planet.
Yeah, it's funny because when you go down the conspiracy rabbit holes, at some point you'll end up looking into or finding, things like Project Camelot, where like they're talking to people who say that there's different species on different planets and people live on the moon and all this stuff. And I'm just like, oh, they seem crazy. I can't prove any of this. And then you also, I actually heard you. It's funny because I haven't heard his name in the longest time. And I remember like way back in the day, for when I first started doing research, he was one of the first people that I'm like, who is this guy? Is this story true? So a lot of the modern day conspiracy theorists, they know Bob Lazar, but we know Phil Snyder. and I remember watching his videos, and this guy has like an injured hand, right? He lost some fingers or whatever. And he's telling the story, and I'm like, I want to believe he's just a crazy person, but there's something about the way he's presenting himself and telling the story that seems legitimately sincere. Like I feel like I believe this guy. And for people who aren't, I remember seeing, I don't know how, maybe you found a better quality video, but back in the day, it was like this black and white grainy video of him.
Yeah, that's all there was, really.
Yeah, that's all there was. And this guy worked in these underground bases and all this stuff. And at the time, it seemed crazy. And now with like the government openly talking about UFOs and all, it's like, now it's like, okay, maybe he wasn't crazy. And just like you said, throughout history, the first ones that who are outspoken and go against the grain seem crazy, but hopefully, you can only suppress the truth for so long. Hopefully, they end up being right, and people realize they weren't insane. But so do you all of the UFO stuff that's going on now, or just maybe your opinion on this stuff in general? Do you think it is other dimension? Because it's like you can kind of see from two perspectives, and I've heard people talk about it as like, okay, it's maybe related to some of the other stuff we're talking about in regards to like maybe lost technology or understanding of the universe that is suppressed from the public, and they're using that technology to do these things. Or the other perspective of like, it's naive to think that we're the only human beings on in this solar system, or that there could be other type of people, other species, other living species that understand time and travel in a way that we don't understand. And it's other people kind of observing us or making contact with us or whatever. So it's like, is it actually domestic? Is it like people on this planet and their technology, or is it another dimension? Like, do you subscribe to one or the other, or do you lean towards one theory more than the other?
I think there's an element of both there, but I'll get more specific because I don't want to sound vague. First of all, the UFO subject and everything related to it, and every possible subcategory of rabbit hole related to it. I've been into that stuff since I was about 13 years old. I grew up X-Files. I'm like, I'm with Mulder. Let's do this, right? And I don't know what it was. That changed my life. That was like, oh my God, it's so obvious. Okay. Like, you either have to say, oh, space is fake and we live in a little snow globe and none of it's real, or we're in a simulated reality, or you go, oh, no, I'm with Giordano Bruno, the guy that got crucified by the Vatican for saying that we're not alone in the universe, and there's a big multi-dimensional universe out there. And I'm with some of the great minds like Tesla and some of them who also talked about that very openly. And I also look at the ancient myths and legends, and like I said, I don't look at them as just a bunch of campfire stories. When you have there's a great book by Jack Barringer called Past Shock, and he wrote this, a very small book. I have it on my shelf. You could read it in an hour. And he wrote this in the 90s, and he was talking about his theory about how when you go and compare all the different religious stories from various texts from literally every corner of the world, and then you talk to the shamans and the oral traditions, the people that pass the oral traditions, his analysis was that with what we currently have that survived, there's over 30,000 ancient texts that discuss advanced beings coming from the sky to Earth to change humanity or to interface with humanity. So that's just what didn't get burnt by the Vatican or sequestered by the Vatican. Like that's what we don't know, that's under the 50 miles of basement in the Vatican. So I look at that and I go, okay, well, maybe where there's smoke, there's fire. Maybe when you have, like, if I ask any person from any religion, where's God or where's the gods? If they're just basic, they're gonna be like, it's up there, man. God's come from heaven. Gods came from heaven to earth. The gods, the fallen ones, the sons of God, came from heaven to earth to interbreed with the women of earth and produce men of renown. Well, that's ancient religious language that's been hyper translated through different periods of time to basically tell you they created hybrid beings, whoever this was, right? So I get into, I was on Ancient Aliens. I was probably there for 7 different seasons. You'll see me sprinkled in there. There's a lot of nonsense on that show. There's a lot of circus around this subject. Let me tell you, I'd probably throw 90% of it in the dumpster fire, but the 10% that remains will blow your mind. And I look at it like, okay, let's compare notes with what we know from the study of the ancient world and how they saw it, and then look at the modern UFO subject and all that comes with it, and all the people, all the Bob Lazars and Phil Schneiders, and just wheel them out. I could sit here and list hundreds of names of people like that, okay? From different parts of the world, from different periods of time that are literally telling you the same story. And so when I heard of Phil Schneider in probably early 2000s, I was like you. I was like, okay, this guy in one presentation is literally validating all these other separate pieces that I've been looking at. And if I even for a moment entertain that what he's talking about is true and compare notes with everybody else, what does that do to the worldview, right? Like it's a total reanalysis. But at the other end of it, Ricky, it's incredibly simple. This is not complicated. Okay. All we have to do, if we accept that we do live in a vast universe of infinite potential of no serious scientist on the planet thinks we're alone in the universe. Okay. And we're past that argument. The question is, can they get here? Can they defeat the speed of light? Blah, blah, blah. Well, just because you guys can't crack the code of speed of light, maybe your entire way of looking at it is wrong, right? Who are we to sit there and stare at things that we can't explain, that can do stuff we can't do, and say, well, it's impossible that they exist because we can't do it? That's just arrogance. That's fear. So there's something here. And another statement that really got me and changed my life, and I used it as sort of the launch pad for Cult of the Medics, because we're going to go there. We're going to go there in the last 3 chapters. Is it came from Charles Fort. I don't know if you know who Charles Fort was.
The name sounds familiar, but I'm not sure why I know his name.
You've probably heard of him. Yeah, I know so many names these days. But Charles Fort was an American writer and paranormal researcher, one of the first conspiracy theorists in America, early 1900s, and he wrote a statement that just changed everything. And he just said, after all my years of looking at all these anomalies, I've come to the conclusion that we are property, and that something or someone owns this earth, all others warned off, and that they have left behind superior slaves or overseers to watch over the human family on their behalf. And that this is known. He said, this is known amongst the principal men of earth. They know this. This is the secret, that earth is essentially has been colonized and turned into a sort of farm in that way. And you sit back, you go, wow, that's horrible. It sounds like science fiction. But just think of it. Like, what would we do? What would we humans do if we were able to get off planet to a degree where we could easily travel to another solar system or galaxy, and we found a primitive evolving species on a planet that had lots of resources? And remember, the number one resource might be something like genetics. It might not be gold and all that stuff. That might just be a bonus. Maybe they needed genetics to help repair their species, right? So you find, what would our scientists do? What would the military industrial complex do if we found a planet like that? And we got off planet like Star Trek and we went there. Well, what we would do is what we did through the British Empire and through the invasion of all these countries, is we would move in, pretend we're the saviors, and basically work on creating a new species or a new group of people that would be our servants and would give us the resources and maybe even do the mining and the work for us. And so when you think about that, that just kind of makes it a little simpler, as I just go, forget about all the shit you've seen in Hollywood for a second about aliens and all this stuff. What if we just look at it like there's people on other planets, civilizations that have grown up, and if there's even one that's even 100 years in advance of us, 100 years ahead of us, just 100 years, what are the implications? What about 500 years? What about 1,000 years? What about 1,000,000 years? What are we talking about here? What if humanity is actually seeded throughout our galaxy, as people like Richard Hoagland would attest to, right? And what if there's actually artifacts in our solar system that's remnants and leftovers that we're getting little glimpses and hints of from some of these rovers and some of these things that indicate that? It's just a question. And if people think that's all just smoke and mirrors, that's fine, because there's plenty of other evidence to get into as well, like the ancient records and these megalithic ruins that nobody can explain, etc. So I'm a bit more like, I love this subject. I'm fascinated. I'm open-minded to all of it. I'm going to roll out 3 theories for people in the later series, because I feel like everybody kind of just tells you, this is my theory, everybody just join my cult. I don't want to do that. I want to be like, I have my own private opinion about this. But I want to give people the option to sort of, where do you fall? And I'm going to roll it out like this. If you want to explain the control structure of the earth and how it's built as a slave colony, okay, for everybody, doesn't matter what race you are. Slavery never went anywhere. It just got upgraded. Then you can look at it like this. We're dealing with a human problem of psychopaths. power hungry, megalomaniacal, cult worshiping psychopaths that have a really twisted ancient religion and worldview, and they're acting on that worldview. I think we could probably dust it up and go, yeah, that's a great operating explanation to help people understand the level of evil, criminality, and tyranny that we see. Option two, let's open up all the religious books and talk to religious people that believe in spiritual dimensions and other dimensions and these kinds of things. Is there something to that? Is this all about angels and demons? Are these people demonically possessed? Are we talking about the archons of the Gnostics that are sort of like a mind parasite that can literally take over and host the body? So is there some kind of like weird mystical spiritual dimension to this stuff? And most people from pretty much any religion would probably go, yep, that's the one. But I still have the third option, which I think pisses everybody off, no matter where you talk to them about it, because I think it's just too simple, which is that this is very nuts and bolts. This is literally just people not of this earth, who aren't loyal to the earth or to the human family, who may actually believe they own us because they may have actually genetically tinkered with us over time, which may have resulted in why we stand out like a sore thumb compared to literally everything else on the planet. And that the people who are in power working for them are literally they just have more of the alien DNA. And that's why they don't really look at themselves as being part of the human family. So basically option three is the ET hypothesis. So if you take, or you could say, well, maybe it's a bit of all three. Maybe it's a bit from each one of those categories, but that's my best way of trying to open the door of discussion to say, we've got to explain this level of evil, some way. It can't just be all psychological. There's a part of it, but it's so anti-human what's being done. Like, quickly think of transhumanism. Okay. There's pros and cons to technology. I am not against technology. But if we're building a situation where we're going to have a centrally controlled world by a central government, that's like, think of what Klaus Schwab and these guys are talking about, that are utilizing technology to essentially enslave humanity, then that's a totally different thing. And it's even worse than that, Ricky. It's not just about having technology run all the different centers of power and the industries. It's about changing humanity into something else. So they're literally saying we're going to the great reset isn't about just your economy and your government. It's about changing you. CRISPR, gene editing, etc. So what species would actively pursue their own obsolescence? What species would actually create a being like Frankenstein that could replace him? And that's the question. And so I start to go, well, maybe it's so anti-human, and all this rhetoric about, oh, we got to depopulate because there's too many humans and it's this anti-human agenda. Maybe it's anti-human because at the top of it, it's not human that's running it. And that's just a theory for people to sit with.
Yeah, that's interesting. I've kind of wrestled with that idea also. I've also wrestled with the idea that they don't see it as anti-human. They see it as improving a flawed creation, right? And something else you said that was really interesting is this idea of like, we have this explanation that we are standout animals because we have hands and we figured out tools and all this stuff. But when you look at like the next most intelligent animal, it's not even close to us. So it's like there's been other intelligent animals that have been on this earth for the same amount of time. Other animals have been on this planet longer than us, and none of them have evolved anywhere close to us. So it's like this idea, like, so it definitely makes you think like, okay, there might be a missing piece to this puzzle and the story. And another thing I want to ask you about was like the city of Atlantis, the lost city of Atlantis. Also, we talk about lost knowledge. Many of us are also intrigued with like, okay, what was in the lost library of Alexander, right? They burned it down. What were they trying to get rid of it? Were they trying to demonize that information, or were they trying to suppress it from the public? Like, do you have any theories on that, on and what could have been there? Or
yeah, well, great questions, man. This is awesome. So I definitely believe in the Atlantean theory. I don't take a lot of the same angles on it as maybe most people do. A lot of people feel like they're digging up Atlantis all over the world. And they're like, I found Atlantis because I found this thing over here in the bottom of the ocean or whatever. And my feeling is that if there wasn't Atlantis, it would have been something like the Roman Empire or the British Empire, where there would have been like a center of power. And then it would have been setting up colonies, and it would have been setting up outposts all over, because it would have been a grand empire at the time. And it wasn't all benign either. It wasn't this like, oh, there was Atlantis and it was all just fairies and angels flying around. Sorry, I think that's where a lot of the dark experiments went wrong, and that's what ended up maybe pushing us back into the Stone Age and having to restart the cycle. So I kind of look at it like that, where it was history isn't like start and end dates, it's cyclical. The Aztecs looked at it like this, the ancient Indians did as well. And I think that is more plausible. And so I think that, if you read people like Ignatius Donnelly, for example, it's funny, you were mentioning earlier on how there's some people who aren't even experts in the field that end up bringing a new perspective that turns out to be true later on and blows the field away. Ignatius Donnelly is one of those guys. He was an Irish statesman, and then he was a hobbyist historian and archaeologist. And, he grew up in Ireland, and he wrote a book on Atlantis. It actually, I know this book well because it came out exactly 100 years before I was born. It was early April 1882, and I was born in April 1982. And I always thought that's kind of special, and I always had the interest in Atlantis. And
David,
I think that. Sorry, go ahead.
When's your birthday?
April 7th, 1982.
Okay.
Yeah.
April 19th, 1985. Yeah. So we're
nice. Aries. Let's do it. So he was one guy that I was like, wow, when you read that book, and it was written again, 1882, and you're going to go, oh, what's this guy going to say? Look, just go through it. The record that he's brought to start you, it's really a book that starts you on the journey. And then you get into all these other guys. And my colleague, Michael Tessarian, does it as well. And it's just brilliantly. And so it's the idea that every ancient myth and legend talks about a lost period of history. Even Tolkien, Lord of the Rings, Tolkien, I think, knew about this. Even his son later spoke about his father believing in the Atlantean theory and said that my father talked about how his Lord of the Rings was his way of telling history in fiction. And I think many pieces of fiction and many films are telling you real history. And, so there's a lost chapter. Let's look at it like that, just to keep it simple. Because Atlantis wasn't always called Atlantis, right? We got Atlantis from the fact they thought it was the Azores and the Atlantic Ocean or whatever. And it was the discussion between Solon and Plato. And it was all just sort of a rumor in history, right? But there's other names throughout all over the world that have different names similar to Atlantis or closely linked to it, or they describe it the same way. It just has a different name. So I feel like, and then you got Graham Hancock's and all these guys that are coming out and saying, yeah, advanced lost human civilizations. There's plenty of evidence for it. So there's a few ways of interpreting the whole subject. I won't bear you down with it all now, but that to me is also something that is known in these elite Masonic and occult circles. They know about this. If I know about it and you know about it, trust me, they know about it. And they probably know about it to a degree that none of us know about it. Okay. And that's because they are the keepers of the ancient knowledge that is not just put out on display for the general public to read. Because remember, look at how they look at us. We've only been actually literate. Most people were not literate just a few hundred years ago. Just think about that. Just a few hundred years ago, maybe even less. Most people were not even able to read and write by themselves. So all the information humanity got came from the pulpit, the priests, the priest class, or the guru class, or the political or royal class. So we were taught, born, bred, and educated by them, right? And who are they? They are the ones that were the Raiders of the Lost Ark, and they know the secrets. Some of them were good and meant well for humanity, and some of them wanted power and control and didn't give a shit and saw us as just something in the way, something as a resource. And I think that when you're talking about those libraries of Alexandria, I don't think those places were, I don't think when they were burnt down and all the records destroyed. I think the records, the most valuable records, were actually plundered and sequestered before the burnings. And don't forget that there's over 11 major libraries similar to Alexandria that were destroyed throughout that period of time. And that's just what we know of. And then think of just every rise and fall of tyranny, where they start burning books and burning heretics and the Inquisitions. Like, how much has been lost over time, and how much has been crafted for our generation today that is just based on total bollocks, right? And people have made entire careers off selling this bollocks. So, I go, well, get into the history of some of the archaeologists that were censored and banned, just like we're seeing the doctors that got censored or banned, and look at some of their predictions, look at some of their theories. Get Michael Cremo out, the guy that wrote the book on Our Forbidden History, where he looks at it as the history of humanity goes back millions of years, not just thousands. And, people like that have all these alternative theories, and really just start to look at the world and ask yourself the question, have we been lied to about our history? Because if we've been lied to about our history, and I'm not talking about, oh, it's just a mistake, or we forgot, or we were just wrong. I'm talking at the top levels, an overt agenda to cover up our history, specifically because of what Orwell said. And he was, Fabian socialist. He was on the inside table for certain things, which is why his book is coming to life. He knew what was going on. He said, whoever controls the past controls the present. Whoever controls the present controls the future. And he just gave you the formula. So if they can hijack your history and they can lie to you about your history, which is the first thing totalitarians do when they move into your country, they lie to the native population about their history. And then they manipulate you that way, because if they cut off your history, they're leaving you as a being that's lost at sea. If I don't know my roots, if I don't know where I came from, who am I? Right? So humanity has like amnesia about our history. That's why we're still fighting about it. And we've been batting the ball back and forth between creationism and Darwinian evolution for what, hundreds of years, thousands, hundreds of years. What if there's a third contender? What if there's a fourth contender? What if there are other theories that can explain all of those things in a much better way that are only known behind the lodge doors? Whereas the rest of humanity is sitting there fighting over a bunch of bullshit or just missing pieces. That's how I see it. So it's for control. It's for the fact that they're looking to guide the destiny of someone is trying to guide the destiny of humankind in a particular direction. And all I ever did, and all my mentors ever did, was put their hand up and go, do we really want to go to this direction? Should we trust these people pushing us in this direction? They do have the advantage of having more knowledge about these things than we do. So should we just believe blindly that they're all benevolent and acting for humanity? I've got questions about that. I don't think that these gods and these vicars and leaders all have our best interest in mind. So, I'm looking forward to when all of this information continues to be disclosed, because then that will bring our freedom back when we have the truth. We need the truth in order to have our freedom back,
Yeah, it's interesting. I remember when I had Michael Millerman on my show, another Canadian. He was the guy who translated Alexander Dugin books into English. First one to do it. The Russian philosopher, some people call him Putin's brain. And Michael Millerman, he, when I talk to him and get into his history, one of the things that one of the first things that caught his attention was mystics. And, he got really obsessed with mystics. And I'm just like, it's the first time I've heard somebody really talk about it. And I'm like, you seem like you're into history, you're in philosophy, you're, nothing supernatural per se, right? And then he had this interest in mystics, and that kind of what opened the door to him, and then made me rethink mystics, and just like that whole field. And then in regards to the books, yeah, I mean, same thing happened, like you said, probably the same thing happened to these libraries as happened to Tesla, right? Like after he passed away, they took all his books, and nobody knows where they are or who's doing what with them or whatnot. So yeah, that's all so fascinating. This idea that we could have multiple hiccups, in our evolution, and either floods or whatever it may be, and some evidence from past civilizations were found or kept or saved, and really, our history could be way greater than we could even imagine, and have all different types of civilizations previous to us. And that's why, like, with the flat earthers, like, there's a spirit to them that I enjoy and I appreciate, because what they're saying is basically, everything you think you know is wrong or could possibly be wrong. And you need to rethink everything, right? Including the way this universe works. So even if I don't agree with their outcome, I love that spirit. I love that idea of at least making people rethink the things they think they already understand and know.
Yeah, that's key. And I mean, I'm with you on the fact that I don't agree with their outcome. I've researched that inside and out. I was interested in it, but I respect anybody that's just saying, hey, I'm just here to ask questions. I found some things that look like flaws to me, and I'm the average man pointing up at the big academics and saying, I want you to prove what you're saying. So I respect that 100% in any field. I would just encourage people to look at all of it from many angles. And that's really what I'm trying to do here is I'm not trying to say a declarative thing, follow me, I've got all the things. I'm really trying to actually just bring back the knowledge from people who were way smarter than I was about this, or people who knew very well one of those aspects. And I want to bring them back to public attention again, because I just feel like when we look at the world and it's also screwed up, like look at this world right now. Like who doesn't want to invent a time travel machine or a beam me up Scotty machine to get the hell out of here, right? Because it's just getting so crazy. Well, how did it get so crazy? Is it just a natural flow of history, or is some of this at least, not all of it, but some of it is managed to become exactly that because it's order out of chaos, right? And when I explain the sort of conspiracy to people, basic, if you're brand new, I just say it's very simple. It's their land, resources, and wealth. That's what it is. And if they consider you either an asset or an obstacle, they're looking at you as numbers on a pie chart. They don't really care about you. These governments and these big think tanks and globalist organizations and the Club of Rome, they don't give a shit about you. They have a mandate of depopulation. They're just sitting there going, look at these guys are getting out of hand, So there's people in the world. And then for people that still struggle with why would they do this? Well, why did any of the dictators do what they did? Why did any of these cult leaders I talk about do what they did? Why did they burn people at the stake for disagreeing with their interpretation of some book? Why a lot of things? Why does human trafficking still exist? Why do we have full-blown grooming programs being taught in schools and having police escorts to make sure that your kids receive the light and the truth of this new agenda, right? Why is everybody so confused? Why? It's like Michael Elner, the fabulous quote where he said, just look at us. Everything is backwards. Everything is upside down. Doctors destroy health. Universities destroy knowledge. Governments destroy freedom. And the major media destroys information. Just start there and just go prove me wrong. Is that not the case? I think it's obvious that it is. So, but then the other side of it is we can't get so doom and gloom about all of this to the point where we feel like we're helpless and there's nothing we can do. The best teachers I've learned from have only told these types of truths or these types of information to inspire you towards the good, to inspire you to go at any moment. If their entire edifice is built on top of the backs of us slaves, all we got to do is stand up and it's over, right? And if we can't get all of humanity because everybody's stuck in mass formation psychosis or whatever, mind control, if we can't get enough people, look at history. Was it ever the majority that changed the tide? No, it was always small individuals, small little groups, little William Wallace over here, little El Cid over there, a few of these guys, little Nikola Tesla getting railed at by everybody until he's proven right. Galileo getting locked up, Giordano Bruno getting burned at the stake after they stapled his tongue to a fence for daring to challenge the church. These are my heroes. And they're the heroes today. People getting censored and still moving forward to warn people. Those are my heroes. My heroes are not the people that follow the status quo. And there's even a status quo in the alternative research community that's getting a little dry too. And so this none of us are immune from this. But if we look at this from the perspective of curiosity and not, I want all the answers and I have all the answers, forget the answers. What about questions? I do this on my series. Chapter 1, if you go to cultofthemedics.com and you start watching through, it's all free. You can watch for free. You'll notice I open it up with just a bunch of questions. And I don't even know if I have all the answers because, Ricky, it wasn't answers that woke me up to any of this or woke up my curiosity. It was intelligent questions that made me think on my end with my logic to go, that's a really good question, actually. I got to think about that. I'm going to follow up on that. And it's the seeking of the answers of the questions that brings you to the truth, not the answer. So beware of people that have all the answers, because I think a lot of times there's a lot of compensation going on and they're just trying to win the popularity contest that's happening. The real authentic guys are going to be asking you more questions to get you to open your mind up to fill in the gaps yourself. Because you can show people all this stuff all you want. They have to eventually go and see it for themselves, you know?
Absolutely. That's a great way to kind of wrap this all up. I could talk to you for another like 3 hours. Unfortunately,
Same here, Ricky. This is great, man. I love what you're talking about here.
but yeah. So let people know where they can get. I know you do another. You have another project too that is subscription, but Cult of the Medics is free. But let people know where they can get all of it and any of it, what social media platforms you're on, how they can support your work. I know you're also on Rockfin, like many of us, and anything else you want to promote.
Oh, thanks, man. I appreciate it. Super fun. Yeah, Rockfin. Shout out to Rockfin. Love the platform. Please go sign up. It's the new killer platform on the internet. They're not censoring anybody, and there's so many great people over there. So I'm at DW Truth Warrior on Rockfin. My website is dwtruthwarrior.com. That's sort of the portal to get you to all the stuff that I do. And I'm doing 3 projects right now. One is Truth Warrior, which is just my regular weekly podcast that I do. And then I do the Unslaved project. It's unslaved.com is a fee for it, but it's the premium show I do with Michael Tessarian. And then third, I'm doing, there's a new very popular network on Rumble called Badlands Media. And they're in the top 3 to 5 every week on Rumble. They're killing it. Lots of great hosts. And I'm co-hosting a show with my good friend Josh Reed from the Red Pill Project. And it's called Earth Chronicles. And we do that every week, 12 noon Pacific on Badlands on Rumble. It's been really growing, really cool stuff. And then Cult of the Medics is sort of, that's my therapy. That's how I can't take all this information in. You got to find a creative outlet. And that's all I did while I was getting locked down in Canada, living in Chinata here. I was just editing these things together, and it became like a fun project for me. And it's all for free. And that's at cultofthemedics.com. So that's where you can find me. My social media, my main is probably Telegram. And again, DW Truthware on Telegram. And then I have a Twitter, it's my second or third Twitter now, at Truth Warrior Dad. And then I just set up an Instagram where I'm not doing any of this other conspiracy stuff. I'm just doing like personal development, martial arts. That I'm just trying to keep it positive on Instagram. And that's DWT Warrior. I know I gave up people a lot of stuff. If you get lost, just go to dwtruthware.com. You'll find it all.
Oh, it's all there. Okay, yeah, and I'll put all the links in the show description too. So definitely follow him on Twitter, Instagram, all that stuff.
Thanks, man.
The nice thing about my Instagram, same thing. Like and my Facebook page, a lot of it's like me and my family. Other interests I have. So it's nice to kind of see other sides of people too. It's like, okay, they're not depressed in these rabbit holes all day 24/7. They do other things, and they smile, and they have fun too, which is important, because that's kind of what we're all kind of fighting for is the right to do those things, and really we're at our best when we're enjoying ourselves and we're with people we love and our communities and all those things that people are trying to take away from us. So definitely smile and enjoy life, because it's too short not to. And who knows, when we die, we might start all over again. These are all interesting questions.
Maybe it's been us the whole time, Ricky. Maybe it's been us the whole time. And can I say one more thing about smiling? I'm trying to start a movement of smiling at children again, in a non-creepy way, of course. Okay. Just just the children have been deprived by having all these people covering their faces, and like the empathy is being destroyed. Their development is being stunted. I don't know if people understand that. So if you see a child looking up at you, give them a smile to let them know there's still goodness in the world. Please do that. Hashtag smile at children, save the children, for crying out loud.
Yeah, no, I hear. I homeschooled for a few years with my wife, because the masks and all the schools and masks and whatnot. I am a true believer of the power of smile. I think a lot of times when you look at two women, you're like, oh, she's so pretty, like, why is she prettier than the other girl? Sometimes it's because she smiles more. She has a pretty smile something inviting about a smile. There's something, or there's certain friends you hang out with that always put you in a good mood. There's a pretty good chance that's probably some of the friends that smile the most, that are always in a good mood, and it's contagious. We talked about energy and the mice experiment. I think there's something about this connection and this energy that's contagious when you're around positive energy or negative energy, that I think it's untapped and ununderstood. We don't quite get why, but I think there's something more than just hey, somebody smiles and I smile. I think there's some serious positive energy that's being shared. So it's a simple thing, but it can light up somebody's day. It can make them feel better, and it's a great way of starting your own little ripple of positive energy around your life and people around you. So I completely agree. I think there's something special about it, and people should do it more often. And there are women out there who have the resting bitch face, right? You can't avoid it, but it's a perfect example of like people who don't smile. They just look mad and mean, and like I'm gonna get attacked if I talk to them. And then you get somebody who's always smiling, and it's like I feel like I can go up to them and talk to them about anything. Like they just are, So there's something beautiful about that. So, but thank you so much, David, for taking the time to chat. Hopefully, this will not be the last time, and hopefully we have you on another Union of the Unwanted in the near future, and keep up all the great work, of course.
Thanks, Ricky, man. It's been a pleasure. Let's definitely do it again. And thanks for your time and your show. It's making an impact. So keep doing it. And thanks to everybody for listening.
Awesome. Thanks, David. Hey, enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll talk soon.
You too, brother. Cheers.
Cheers.